Dan here over at Synergy Sports. I'm going to be going through some thoracic mobility and stability. So when it comes to especially shoulder health, one of the big areas I look at is our thoracic spine. So that's our middle portion that should be relatively more mobile compared to our other segments, the cervical spine and our lumbar spine. How does it help? Well, think about whenever I reach, I'm an overhead athlete, I'm rotating up overhead, I'm coming across the body, swinging across. I need help for my thoracic spine to regenerate or generate all that power transferring from my foot on up to my arm, right? So that shoulder doesn't take all the stress. Okay, I see a lot of that with maybe some people in the major leagues throwing with the Tommy Johns. You see a leak of energy somewhere and that elbow gets beat up. Okay, it's a very similar concept. So you want help from that thoracic spine. So it should be able to move really well in 3 planes of motion, that front to back, side to side, and the rotation. So here's a series that I'd like to use for my number one of my evaluations, but then also a warm-up exercise. So what I'll do is I'll start with my sagittal plane, so my front to back. All these I'm going to have my hands up on my shoulders, and I'm thinking about my shoulders leading the motion, okay, rather than just starting to bend over to the back, the low back. So I'll start with my hands on my shoulders. Now I'm going to start to round forward, okay, making sure I can breathe through all these positions. And then I'm going to start to come back. Now I don't have much extension here, but I'm trying to see how much can I get my back to start to round back. Okay, so I'll go through that position a few times, nice and slow, full range, making sure I can breathe through it. Then I want to work in my frontal plane, so that's the side to side. So here I'm going to turn around. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be leading one shoulder, driving to the side, and then to the other side, okay? Okay, so notice there's that little extra curve, or at least there should be that little extra curve, instead of me just bending to the side, and maybe I don't get much of an extra curvature through there. The last one's going to be rotation. Now starting in that same position, again, think of that shoulder leading the motion, and I'm going to drive across, come back, drive across, and back, okay? If we notice a limitation in one of these, especially when you're going side to side, we might want to address that, especially for athletes that tend to be one side more dominant, like our overhead throwing athletes, or our rotational, like a baseball batter or a hockey player, right? They're going to rotate to one side a lot more than the other. So we might have some limitations on one side. We want to make sure that we work on that and try to even them out the best we can. Not only is that going to keep us healthy, but it's also going to keep us actually working stronger with that one side, okay? So we're not going to be as limited. So then I can work on some active assisted as well. So if you have any kind of a stick, a broom at home will work. This is one of my first exercises I'll have people go to, is one side at a time, and I can go through that same series, right? So I will drive the hand up, so this hand is going with, just kind of along for the ride. Bottom hand is doing most of the work. So now I'm incorporating the shoulder with my thoracic spine and that shoulder blade. All three work to help get me as much overhead motion as I can, reaching there and then driving forward. Okay, so that could be my sagittal plane, my front to back. I can go through my frontal plane, where now I'm keeping those arms straight, pushed up tall, and I'm going to really try to round out right through that rib cage and that thoracic spine. So notice the difference here versus here, that little extra rounding that I'm getting. Okay, so I have to really push up tall, make sure I can breathe there. And then rotation, here you can do 2 different ways. You can do true rotation, where you're just going to the side. You can also go diagonal patterns. Make sure you hit both. They're going to be really important for sport. So I'm getting a diagonal pattern going up and across here, and then down and across here. Okay? So that's my basic mobility series for that thoracic spine. Again, if you notice a significant difference on side to side, you can work on a lot of these movements with or without a stick to help try to improve those. How do you strengthen? Well, there's a lot of different ways we can do this, really depending on what your limitation is. Biggest thing is, if we want to make sure our thoracic spine is moving well on its own first, okay, because once we add the shoulder in, a lot of times that shoulder is going to try to take over or if I have a limitation even in my shoulder and I try to bring my arm up, I might start to round there. So you notice how they affect one another. Okay, so that's why I use this as a tool to see how well I can move there first, and then I add the arms to it to see where maybe a limitation is or where I may need more strengthening. Okay, so based on that, you can kind of play around with what your sport is, or come ask us, and we'll help you out. Until next time.